All right, class, here we are with Excel Chapter 7, Mid-Level 1. It's called Admissions. And this spreadsheet, the scenario is that we're looking at applicants to a college or university, and we're looking at their SAT and GPA scores and deciding who should be admitted amongst other categories. So you'll notice that this takes a big step up from where we're used to in Excel, introduces a whole bunch of new formulas. So I'll try and take my time as we get through those. So I've already got step 1 done because I have my sheet open, as you can see. Then on to step 2. The first thing we want to do, says here, is calculate the number of days between the initial deadline and the date received. So we've got our deadline up here, date received in this column for each of the applicants. So it says in D11, so that's here, insert the days function. Okay, so DAYS. I'll type it up here up at the top because it kind of gets cut off in this cell. So in here, we need to note that the initial deadline is stored in B8, which is right here. And the date received is in C11, okay? And then we're supposed to use mixed and relative cells correctly. So here in this activity, they're encouraging us to use mixed references rather than solid absolute ones, just to get the practice in. So I will try and follow along and make sure we do that properly. So using the days formula, we need to use the end date minus the start date. So here we go. We've got our, so it's also hard when you're typing in here. It overlaps the cell you want to click on. So if you want to do that, you can click the, if you go back into the cells, you can use your arrow keys to pick up what you want. So I want the end date first, I'm pretty sure. We'll see if the math works. And if I'm going to use a mixed reference, I know I'm going to drag this down. So if I want to use a mixed reference, I need to lock the row and I don't need to worry about the column. So I'm going to lock the row. So just the $ on the 8. And then I need to pick my date received. So I'm going to use the arrow keys to select in behind here. You can also type in C11. That would work too. So I'm going to do that and hit enter. And that looks right. It was 106 days before the deadline. Okay. So we're not told to fill down here. So we're done step 2. Step 3 is copy the range down. So D11 to D12 to D67. So I'll do that now. Assume D67 is the last row. Yes, it is. Okay, and it says here a negative value indicates the application was received after the initial deadline. So that's these few people here. All right, so that's step 3. Step 4. Now we're going to do an if function here. So we're going to determine if someone should be admitted early or not. So in G11, which I've selected, we're going to insert the if function. All right, so let's do that. And I'll type up here again to make sure we can see what I'm writing all the time. And we need a nested AND function within our if. And we need it to display a yes or no in the admit early column. So those are, it's telling us what our results of this if are going to be. So the next thing we need to know is, okay, what are the conditions that we're applying here? So it says the university admits a student early if that student meets both the early admission criteria for the SAT, so that's B3. So B3 is 1400. And GPA, which is in B4, so that's the 3.8. Okay, used relative and mixed references, and then based on the requirements, we should see that the first student should be admitted early. Okay, so we're going to put in our and because we have 2 things that must be met for this condition to be true. So the first one is this person's SAT score must be, is it greater than or greater than equal to? Be 1400 or higher, so that's a greater than or equal to, and 1400. Okay, and I'm gonna get my reference in here right. So as I fill this down, I don't want it to move down off the page. I'm not worried about the column. So if I'm told I need to use a mixed reference, I'm just going to have my $ in front of the row number. So I'm going to do that. So that's our first condition. Hit the comma. So next in the and, the GPA must be 3.8 or higher. So that's another greater than or equal to. So I can't click on my GPA. So I'm just going to click over here and use my arrows to make sure it says F11. And again, greater than or equal to the GPA, and I'm going to $ our row. So those are my two conditions. So that will return either a true or a false. Now I'm back into my if. I hit my comma and value if true. Well, we need it to say yes if they're admitted early. Oop, capital, yes. And no if they won't be. All right, so let's see if that worked. All right, so we got it right because they said it was supposed to be yes, but we'll really know whether that worked or not when we fill down, but we're not told to fill down yet. So we're done step 4. Step 5, now we're going to determine if a student should be rejected early. So in cell H11, so that's here, and I'm going to type in the formula bar, enter the if function with a nested OR. So this means that either one of the conditions that you include, if either one of them are true, then it returns true. It doesn't have to be both anymore like the and. So I'm going to do if with a nested OR, and we'll keep reading and see what it wants us to do. So again, it tells us that we want it to have a yes or no as the result, same as last time, cool. So it says here, the university rejects a student early if that student has its SAT score of less than 800. That's cell C3. Okay, so let's grab SAT score less than. So it's less than 800. It doesn't say less than or equal to, so I'm going to do 800. Again, I'm going to lock the row on that. And then the second condition is a GPA below 1.8. All right, so I pick the person's GPA less than 1.8, lock my row with my $, and I'm done my OR because I've done my condition. So close parentheses, then hit my comma to do the value if true. So value if true is yes, and value if false is no. All right, so let's see how that works. So reject early, no, that would make sense because we're already accepting that person early. So that's it for step 5. Step 6, we're going to calculate an applicant's admission score. So enter the formula to calculate the admission score, multiply the GPA. All right, so multiply the GPA, so GPA is 4, by the multiplier, which is in B7. So B7 is here, it's 600. Again, I'm going to lock the row to make sure when we fill down, it doesn't move. Again, you could use a absolute reference here, but we're told to use mixed. So we have to decide which is more important to lock, either the column or the row. In this case, it's the row. So there we go for that. And then we're supposed to add the SAT score. So I'm going to go plus that. Now I'm going to make, Excel will probably do this right, but I'm going to put parentheses around my multiplication to make sure it doesn't add this first and then multiply. I'm just being careful. So I'll hit enter there, and I get a score of 39.25. So that's it for step 6. Step 7, in column J, so that's in here, we're going to enter the ifs function. So this is a new function, IFS ifs. And what this one does is it basically runs through all these conditions, and as soon as it finds one that's true, it stops and then pushes out the result. So you can have, like, if it's this, do this, this, do this, this, do this, bop, 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 all the way along. So if admit early is yes, display the text early admission. Okay, so if early admission is that, and so we're supposed to do our logical test, equals yes, Then we tell it what to do. We want to display early admission. Oh, okay. Now, oh, I forgot my quote. Okay, there we go. Now logical test 2. If the score is greater than the threshold score in B6, display admit. Okay, so if the score, so this is the score, is greater than the threshold in B6, so B6 is here, and I'm going to use a mixed reference and lock the row here. So that's my test. We need to display early rejection. Okay, so quotes, early rejection, quotes. On to the next part, logical test 3. If the score is greater than the threshold score in B6, display admit. Okay, so score is greater than the threshold score. We're going to display admit. Okay, and I forgot my $sign on the row here, so I'm going to put that in. And then if the score is lesser than or equal to the threshold score in cell B6, display reject. Okay, so if the score here is less than or equal to the threshold in B6, then we will do reject. Okay, so I'll lock my row and then reject. Okay, so let's check this. If G11 is yes, it does early admission. If the score is greater than that, it does, or is less than that, early rejection. B6. I think we have a missed reference here. If reject early is yes. Okay, so reject early is yes. So this should be if this is equal to yes. There we go. Little goof up, but that should still work. So let's see if we got it to work. Okay, so it at least worked for this person because, so what it did is it started checking. Okay, first, is this yes? Okay, it is, so it did early admission. If this was no, then it would start checking, okay, was this yes? Then display it. Okay, so that didn't work, so then it goes on to the next one in rows until it finds the one that works properly. Okay, so that's it for step 7. Step 8, we're ready to copy the formulas down their respective columns. So copy the formulas down, admit early, reject early, score, and final decision. So all the ones where we worked. So let's do that. Down here, again, we can do these all at the same time if we want, but I'm going to do them one at a time just so I can double check, make sure, okay, which are my cell references still working as I move down the page. Yep, those are stuck there. This one's on here, that's good. I'm going to do the same with this guy. All right, I'm still getting yes and no's. Let's make sure my references work. Okay, we're good. The score one I'm not too worried about because it's just a multiplication and adding based on the row. And this will be the moment of truth here. So let's move this one down, see if we got that right. Okay. So we've got a bunch of different ones. Let's see. Okay, let's check an early rejection. Yeah, so reject early is yes. So we displayed the right thing. And this guy's score is less than threshold, so it's a reject. Okay, I think it worked properly. So that's good. So we're done step 8. Step 9, we're going to enter formulas in the summary data section. So this is this big box up here in the top. So this is where we get into some new formulas. So count if, average if, that kind of stuff. So the first thing we want to do, so we want to enter formulas in the data summary section to summarize key points. First, you want to determine the number of early admissions and the number of admits. Okay, so in cell H3, insert the COUNTIF function. Okay, so I'm in H3 equals COUNTIF. All right, so we want to count the number of early admissions in the range of J11 to J67. So that's this column here. So the first thing in the COUNTIF is you got to pick the range where you're trying to count things. So I do that, hit the comma, okay. And then I need to insert the criteria. So what am I looking for in there? Well, I'm looking for E3, which is early admission, which is this, okay. So that should give me my count, which is 9, and I know that's right. So one thing I'm also going to do is I am going to make sure that when I copy this down to H4, which is what we're told to do, my range selection doesn't move down the page. So I'm going to lock the rows using mixed references in there. So I'll hit enter. Still worked, good. And then if I copy this down to this one, my range is the same, and now it's looking at admit. So that's perfect. So it's got 33. That works. All right, so that's step 9. Step 10. Next, you want to calculate the average SAT score for early admissions. Okay, so that's cell I3. That's this one. And we're going to use the average if formula. So we're supposed to look at the score in the range of E11 to E67, where the final decisions in J11 to J67 are early admission. So we're trying to look at, okay, everyone who's an early admission, what's their average SAT score? So in the average if, you got to pick your range first, but it's the range where the decision is going to happen. The range where you're going to determine your average by looking at the scores or the SATs is the range that you pick third. So we're making our decision based on whether or not they're early admission. So I need to pick that range first. I'll do that. And then a comma. And I'm looking to make sure that they are early admission. So that's over here. Pick that. And then the range at which we're doing an average is the average SAT score in the E column. So that's here, so I'll pick that. All right. So I won't worry about my references just yet. I'm just going to make sure my formula works. So I'm going to hit enter. All right, and I get a big number with lots of decimals. We will worry about the decimals later. So we know that we're going to copy this down to the admit because we're told use a relative reference E3. Yeah, so the row numbers and the ranges do not change when copied down. Okay, so we need to lock our row numbers for both of our ranges. Okay, so our formula still works. Okay, it doesn't tell us yet to move it down to yet. We're going to do that in step 12. So we're good with step 10. Step 11, you want to calculate the average GPA score for early admissions. So that's in J3, and we're going to use the average if again. All right, so equals average if. So it's going to be based on, again, whether they're early admitted or not, and then we're going to do average GPA instead of average SAT. So I need to do the same thing again, the final decision, grab that. I'm going to lock my rows again here. I know that, hit my comma. We know that it's supposed to be early admission, so I'm picking that. And then we're averaging GPA, so I'm going to select that column and put my dollar signs in front of there. Hit my parentheses, and we'll see if the number works. 3.97, that looks right to me. Okay, so that's it for step 11. Step 12, we're going to apply the number format with 0 decimals to I3. Okay, so I'm going to go to number format, and it's 0 decimals, get rid of the decimals. Okay, cool. And then copy down in the range, so these two, I3, J3 to I4, J4. Okay, that looks like it worked. Our mixed and relative references worked properly. Okay, so that's it for step 12. So the next thing we want to do is count the number of applications that meet 2 separate conditions. So in H5, enter the COUNTIFs function to count the total number of applications that meet 2 conditions. Scores in the range of I11 to I67 are greater than 3,500. So you can see score greater than 3,500 here. And final decisions are early admissions. Okay, so we get a little more complicated here. So let's do COUNTIFs. So this is where you can use more than one criteria to do your count. So it has to meet both criteria in order to be counted, whereas COUNTIF only worked based on one. So the first thing we need to do is pick our criteria range. So where is our first criteria? Well, we're going to be looking at the I column because we're looking for score greater than or equal to 3,500. So I'm going to pull out the score, and I'm going to $sign my rows and hit the comma. Go back up here. Next thing we need to do is, okay, so what are we looking for in there? Well, we're looking for it to be greater than or equal to 3,500. So we have to put this in quotes to make it work. Greater than, equal to 3,500. And then we can move on to the next criteria. So we want the final decisions in J11 to J67 are early admissions. So I'm going to select the criteria range for our second count. I'm going to lock my rows just in case. And then we want this to be early admission. And it tells us that we should use E3 as our cell that we're referencing to, so I will pick that. Close my parentheses. So now it's only going to count if this is true and this is true. We'll see how many there are. So in total, there's 9. Okay, so that's it for step 13. Step 14, you want to count the number of applications that meet 2 more conditions. So we're talking about cell H6 now, and we're trying to determine if the applications are from in-state and whether or not they're early admissions. So let's do our COUNTIFs again. Don't forget the S. So the first thing is whether they're in-state or not. So that's B, column B. So I'm going to pull that. Okay. And actually it doesn't say use mixed references or anything here, so I'm just going to use relative and we'll see if we get away with it. So we're trying to see if they are in state there. So I'm going to put in quotes in state because that's what we're looking for in there. Then in the next one, we're supposed to see if they were admitted early. So it's just the same as the last one we did. Get their admission status. And we'll pull the what we're looking for. Our criteria will be early admissions in E3 as we are instructed. So I'll hit enter now. And we get 4. Now that we've done that, we are done. Step 14, we're on to step 15. We're going to introduce a new formula. This is max ifs. So in cell H7, that's here, we're going to insert the max ifs function to identify the highest score in the range I11 to I67 that meets 2 conditions. Okay, so I'll start typing my formula in here. Max ifs. Okay. So the first thing in this formula we need to do is find the max range, aka the range where we're trying to find our maximum. So we're trying to find that in column I because we're looking for the max score. So here's all the scores. So I'll grab that and hit my comma. And now we move on to the criteria ranges and criteria where we're going to apply. So the first thing is we're supposed to find if they are in state. So we're going to look at their residence here and hit my comma, and we want ones that are in state. Hit my comma again. The next thing we're supposed to see if the final decisions in the J column are early admissions. So we're back to the same thing here. So get our final decision column. And then we need it to be early admissions where we can pull from there. So let's see how that worked. 4,000. So someone had a score of 4,000, which I would assume is probably the max you can get. So that's it for step 15. Step 16, we're going to do the average. We're going to do a new formula called average ifs. I think we did average if here. Now we're going to do average ifs. So I'll type that in, average ifs. So that works like our max ifs that we were just using. So we're going to use two conditions here to determine whether something should be included in the average. So the first thing we're going to do is average the column I. So again, we're going to be looking at scores. So I'm just going to pick that first before we even worry about conditions because I can highlight that right away. So the first thing we need to do is find our criteria range. So we're going to try and see if residences in the range of column B are in state. So we've got to pull out column B. And we want that to be in state as our criteria. And then our second criteria point is that, so it's based on J 11 to 67. So I'll pull that first before I explain how we're doing the criteria part. So we've got that. Oh, it looks like my other selection missed a, oh no, it looks good now. Okay, we're good there. So I've got my range, and then we have to put in our second criteria. So our second criteria, we're going to use wildcards. So wildcards allow you to find a cell that has at least what you enter as what you're trying to find. So in this case, we're trying to find cells that have ADM. So they could be ADM from admit. It could be ADM from early admission. And I don't think there's any other ones that say have ADM in it. So what this will do is it'll pick up all the cells that say either early admission or admit. So we're going to use that. So we want in quotes wildcard or asterisk. So that says anything before the ADM is cool. Doesn't matter what it says. Then put the ADM. And then another wildcard at the end that says, okay, whatever you have after the M, it can be anything, just find this ADM only. So I'll put that in quotes. And then we'll close our formula, make sure it works. And it did, 3588. So this is the average score for in-state people who are either early admitted or just plain admitted. Okay, complicated, but it works. So that's it for step 16. On to the last page. So we're going to cell I5 now. And so that's here. And we're going to do the average ifs function to calculate the average SAT score that meets two conditions. Okay, so we want to meet two conditions, so we're using average ifs instead of average if, because average if only works for one condition. So we're trying to find the average SAT score that meets two conditions. So average SAT score, so that's here, and my average range is the first thing I need to choose, so I'm going to grab that. And in this question, or the step, if you look at the bottom, it says use mixed references appropriately. So let's see. In all likelihood, I'm going to have to move this over this way. So I want to lock my columns so the columns don't move, because if I move it this way, it's going to move this SAT. Oh, pardon me. If I move it this way, I want it to pull out GPA because this is the average GPA area. So I want it to move, I want this one to move across. So I'm going to let that stand and just do the row. And now I'm going to move on to the criteria. So we need criteria. So column I is greater than or equal to 3,500. So that's our score. So I'm going to pick up the score range. Okay. And I know when I move that around, I don't want that sliding off into there. So I'm going to lock my columns here. Again, if I wasn't instructed to only use mixed, I would just do as absolute reference here where I lock both the column and the row at the same time. So the next one is, so we're checking whether it's greater than or equal to 3,500. So again, we're going to put it in quotes, greater than, equal to 3,500. Okay. And then our second criteria range is final decisions are early admission. So that's based on J. Again, I'm going to lock my column so it doesn't move off. And then we want it to say early admission, which is that. I want to drag this across. I also want it to stick on the column, so I'm going to do that. And we'll see if it worked. 1561, that looks good. All right. So, done step 17. Step 18, we're going to do the calculate the average SAT score on this line here in I6. So that's that one. Okay. So we'll do our average ifs again. We're trying to find the average SAT score again. So let me pull that. And I'm going to lock my rows because I want my column to move, because if I drag it into average GPA, I want it to move over into this GPA column. So criteria range, residences are in state. Okay, so this is the column with the residences stuff. And I want to lock my column so when I move it over, it doesn't move. And I want it to say in state. And then the second thing we need to do is final decisions are early admissions. Okay, so pull the early admissions column. And I'll lock my columns there. Whoop, there we go. And I want it to be early admission, so I'll pull from E3 there and I'll lock its column too. So let's see if that worked. Perfect. 1566, that looks right to me. All right. And it doesn't tell me to change the cell format, but I'm going to do it anyway so it looks nice and get rid of the decimals. Okay, so that's it for 18. Step 19, copy I5 and I6 to J5, J6. So we're moving these guys over to here. And if my mixed references work properly, it should be good. So let me, it doesn't say to change this, but I'm going to move it so we have decimal places. Okay, so that makes more sense. So it's 3.97, and that's the right answer based on what I have. So that we're good for step 19. Step 20, we're going to insert a map that depicts admissions by state. Okay, so this is a new thing. So display the map worksheet. So that's down here. And we're going to create a map chart from A1 to B5. A1 to B5. So let's go to insert, and we're going to choose maps. All right, so filled map, choose that. Okay. And we're going to change the chart title to say admissions by state. All right, admissions by state. Okay. And then we want to display the format data series task pane. So what I'm going to do is just click on the map, double click on it, and I'll get my left or right hand bar like I'm used to for charts. And we want to change it so it says, so select only regions with data as the map area. Okay, so map area, only regions with data. So it gets rid of all the states that didn't have anything. So if I click on that, okay, here we go. So we're stuck with Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Connecticut. Okay, so that's it for step 20. Step 21, we want the top left corner of the map in cell C1. So cut and paste the map into C1. Okay, so cut, paste into C1. And then we want to have the height to 3.12. So I'm going to go to the chart tools format area. So we want height to 3.12. All right, 0.12. And we want the width is 3.26. Okay, that's it for 21. 22, create a footer with your name, sheet code, and file name code on all sheets. So to do that, I'm going to highlight both sheets at the same time to be fast. Page layout, page setup dialog. Here we go. You guys are used to this by now. Sheet code, file code, boom, boom. And there we go. That's it for step 22. All right. Whew, that was a long one, but we're done. I hope it went well. There was a lot of new stuff in there. So best of luck as you move on to the capstone.